I thought hospitals were safe havens until my stepbrother turned the waiting room into his personal courtroom. He shoved papers in my face and screamed that I had better start signing. Then he slapped me right in front of a nurse, as I tasted metal in my mouth. The truth hit me harder than his hand. He did not just want the inheritance. He was here to erase me from the life of my father forever. My name is Lillian Parker, and 3 days ago, I was lying on an operating table while a surgeon repaired the internal damage that had nearly killed me. Today, I was supposed to be focusing on healing. I was supposed to be walking slowly, breathing deeply, and listening to a doctor tell me that the worst was over. But as I stepped through the sliding glass doors of the medical center, the antiseptic smell hit me like a physical wall. It was that sharp, chemical scent of bleach and rubbing alcohol that tells your brain something is wrong, even when everything looks clean. My body felt heavy, dragging under the weight of exhaustion and the lingering effects of anesthesia. Every step sent a dull, throbbing ache through my lower abdomen, a constant reminder of the 20 staples holding me together. I clutched my purse against my side, using it as a makeshift shield, protecting the tender skin beneath my blouse. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a frequency that seemed to drill right into my temples. I just wanted to get this checkup over with. I just wanted to go back to my father's house, curl up in the guest room, and sleep for 12 hours. I turned the corner into the waiting room for Suite 3B. It was a standard, depressing clinic space. There were beige chairs lined up against the wall, a few outdated magazines scattered on a low table, and a TV in the corner playing a cooking show on mute. There was an elderly woman coughing into a handkerchief and a young mother bouncing a fussing baby on her knee. It should have been mundane. It should have been safe. Then I saw him. Mason Kincaid was sitting in the center of the room, occupying 2 chairs with his legs spread wide in a display of arrogance that made my stomach turn. He was wearing a navy suit that was too expensive for a Tuesday morning, the kind of suit my father would have paid for before he realized exactly what kind of man his stepson was. Mason was not looking at a magazine. He was not looking at his phone. He was looking directly at the door, waiting for me. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating from the pain medication. Why would he be here? How could he possibly know I had an appointment at this specific clinic? At this specific time, I had made the call from a burner phone I bought at a gas station, specifically to keep him and his mother, Darlene, away from me while I recovered. Mason stood up the moment our eyes locked. He did not smile. His face was a mask of cold, predatory intent. He picked up a thick stack of legal documents from the seat beside him. The sound of the heavy paper rustling seemed deafening in the quiet room. "Lillian," he said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. I froze. My instinct was to turn and run, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I took a small, shaky step backward. "What are you doing here? Mason?" My voice sounded thin, brittle. "Get away from me!" He ignored me. He closed the distance between us in 3 long strides, invading my personal space until I could smell his cologne, an overpowering musk that made me nauseous. He shoved the papers toward my chest. I had to lift my hands to stop them from hitting me, and the movement pulled at my stitches, sending a sharp spike of fire through my midsection. "You better start signing," he barked. The volume of his voice made the young mother in the corner jump. The receptionist behind the glass partition stood up, her eyes wide. "Mason, stop," I whispered, trying to keep the scene contained. "I am not signing anything. I told you this at the funeral. I told you this when you tried to break into the house." "You think you have time," Mason sneered. He shook the papers again. "This is a waiver of inheritance rights. It is a settlement offer, a generous one. You sign this. You walk away with $50,000 cash, today. You don't sign, you get 0. $50,000. The insult of it almost made me laugh. If it didn't hurt so much to breathe. My father's estate included the company, the patent portfolio, the land in Montana. It was worth millions. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that my father had spent 40 years building Crestwell Civil and Stone, and Mason wanted to strip it for parts to fund his gambling debts and his mother's lifestyle. I am not signing, I said, my voice gaining a fraction more steel. I will speak to my lawyer when I am medically cleared. Now move. Your lawyer? Mason laughed. A short, sharp sound that held no humor. You mean that dinosaur Merritt? He doesn't know what's coming. None of you do. He took another step closer. He was looming over me now, using his height to intimidate. I was 5'7", but I felt tiny beneath him. How did you find me? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I didn't tell anyone I was coming here. Mason's expression shifted. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, and for the first time, I saw something truly terrifying in his eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was knowledge. It was the look of someone who had seen cards I didn't even know were on the table. You think you can hide, he whispered, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. We know where you sleep. We know who you call. We know exactly what pills you're taking. A chill that had nothing to do with the clinic's air conditioning raced down my spine. He was tracking me. They had access to something: my phone, my car, maybe even my medical records. The violation felt worse than the surgery. Back off, I said, louder this time. I am going to call the police. Call them, Mason challenged. Tell them what? That your brother wants to help you settle a family dispute. Look at you. Lillian, you're a mess. You can barely stand up. You're not capable of running the company. You're not even capable of walking to the front desk. He reached out. I thought he was going to hand me the pen. Instead, his hand clamped onto my left shoulder. His fingers dug in hard. It was the shoulder on the same side as my incision. The pressure sent a shockwave of pain radiating down my chest. I gasped, my knees buckling. Let go, I cried out. Sign the damn papers. Lillian, he shouted. The pretense of civility was gone. His face was red, the veins in his neck bulging. I am done playing games with you. You are ruining everything. Sign it. Sir, step away from her. The receptionist yelled from behind the glass. I heard the sound of her sliding window slamming open. I am calling security. Mason didn't look at her. He was fixated on me, his eyes wide and manic. You think you're smart? You think because Dad liked you better. You win. He's dead. Lillian, he is dead, and he is not coming back to save you. I tried to twist away from his grip, but I was too weak. My foot caught on the leg of one of the beige chairs. I stumbled, my balance failing. Get your hands off me. I swung my arm up, a clumsy, desperate attempt to break his hold. My hand brushed against his forearm. It was nothing a defensive reflex from a sick woman, but Mason reacted as if I had attacked him. Don't you touch me, he roared. And then he moved. It happened in slow motion, yet it was over before my brain could process the trajectory. Mason pulled his hand back. His palm was open, his fingers rigid. I saw the flash of the gold watch my father had given him for his 30th birthday, the watch he didn't deserve. His hand connected with the side of my face with a sickening, wet crack. The force of the blow was tremendous. It wasn't a warning tap. It was a full-force strike meant to damage. My head snapped to the right. The room spun violently. The floor seemed to rush up to meet me. I hit the linoleum hard. My hip took the brunt of the impact. Jarring my surgical wounds, a scream tore from my throat. Not from the slap, but from the agony in my abdomen as the stitches strained against the sudden movement. Total silence descended on the room. The coughing woman had stopped coughing. The baby had stopped crying. The cooking show on the TV seemed to be the only sound left in the universe. A cheerful chef chopping onions while I lay on the cold floor of a medical clinic. I blinked, trying to clear the black spots dancing in my vision. My cheek burned with a heat that was spreading rapidly to my ear and neck. I moved my tongue inside my mouth and tasted it copper, sharp, metallic, undeniable. My lip was split. I touched my fingers to my mouth and pulled them away. Red, bright red blood against my pale skin. "Oh my God!" the young mother screamed, finally breaking the paralysis. She scrambled up, clutching her baby, backing away from Mason as if he were a monster. "Security. We need security in waiting room 3B, immediately," The receptionist was screaming into her phone. "Call 911. We have an assault." I looked up. From my vantage point on the floor, Mason looked like a giant. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He didn't look sorry. He didn't look horrified at what he had done to his sick stepsister. He looked annoyed. He looked like I was an inconvenience that refused to be swept away. He straightened his jacket, smoothing the lapels with a trembling hand. He looked down at me with pure disgust. "You made me do that," he spat. The classic abuser's defense. "You always have to push, don't you? Lillian." I tried to push myself up, but my arms were shaking too badly. I collapsed back onto my elbows, wheezing. "You think you won," Mason hissed, stepping over my legs to get to the exit. He leaned down one last time, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper so only I could hear. "You think because people are watching, you are safe. Go home, Lillian." "Oh, wait, you can't." He grinned, a jagged, cruel expression. "You don't have a home to go back to. Not anymore." With that, he turned and marched toward the automatic doors. He didn't run. He walked with the stride of a man who believed consequences were for other people. "Stay with me, honey. Don't move." A nurse was running toward me now, her blue scrubs blurring in my vision. She dropped to her knees beside me, her hands hovering over my face. "Did you lose consciousness? Can you hear me?" "I'm okay," I rasped, though I was far from it. "Don't try to talk. The police are coming," the nurse said, gently dabbing at my lip with a piece of gauze. "He's not getting away with this." I didn't look at the nurse. I didn't look at the door where Mason had vanished. I slowly lifted my chin, fighting the wave of dizziness. My eyes found the corner of the ceiling, just above the reception desk. There, blinking with a steady, rhythmic red light, was a domed security camera. It was angled perfectly toward the center of the room. It had seen Mason enter. It had seen him block my path. It had seen the papers, and it had seen the strike that knocked me to the ground. Mason thought he had broken me. He thought that by humiliating me in public, by physically dominating me while I was weak, he would scare me into signing his fraudulent papers. He thought he was the judge, jury, and executioner. But as the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth again, a strange coldness settled over my heart. It wasn't shock. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. He had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had given me the one thing I didn't have before. He had given me indisputable, tangible proof of his instability. I stared into the lens of the camera. Good. I thought, the word echoing in my mind like a gavel strike. Let it record. Let it see every single frame. Mason Kincaid had come here to bury me. Instead, he had just handed me the shovel. To understand the violence in that hospital waiting room, you have to rewind the clock. You have to go back 2 weeks, to the silence that settled over my father's house like a heavy, suffocating blanket. My father, Robert Parker, was not supposed to die. He had been managing his heart condition for years. We had a routine. We had plans. On the Monday before he passed, we had spent 3 hours reviewing the quarterly projections for Crestwell, Civil, and Stone. He was sharp, lucid, and laughing about a vendor who tried to overcharge us for concrete. He told me then, as he had told me 1,000 times before, that the company was not just an asset, it was a responsibility. He spoke about the pension fund for the workers, men and women who had given 30 years of their lives to our family business. He told me I was the only one he trusted to protect them. Then, on a Wednesday, his heart simply stopped. The days following the funeral were a blur of black clothing, casserole dishes from neighbors I barely knew, and a numbness that made my hands shake. I was staying in his house, my childhood home, because I could not bear to leave it empty. Every room smelled like his pipe tobacco and old leather. Every floorboard creak sounded like his footsteps. I was vulnerable, grieving, and barely sleeping. That was exactly when the vultures decided to circle. It was 3 days after we put my father in the ground. I was sitting in the living room, staring at a wall without really seeing it. When the front door opened without a knock, I had not locked it. In this neighborhood, and in my state of mind, Security had been an afterthought. The sound of heavy boots on the hardwood floor snapped me out of my trance. I stood up, tightening the belt of my robe. Darlene Kincaid walked in first. My stepmother was a woman who had mastered the art of weaponizing politeness. She was wearing a black dress that was tastefully cut, but perhaps a shade too tight. Her blonde hair coiffed into a helmet of perfection. Behind her walked Mason, and behind him were two men in gray jumpsuits I did not recognize. "Lillian, honey," Darlene cooed. Her voice was like syrup poured over broken glass. "Look at you. You look absolutely dreadful. Have you eaten anything at all?" She walked past me without waiting for an answer, her eyes immediately scanning the room. It was not a look of concern, it was an appraisal. She was counting inventory. "What are you doing here?" "Darlene?" I asked, my voice raspy from disuse. "Who are these men?" "We are just here to help," Mason answered from the doorway. He was chewing gum, a rhythmic, wet sound that grated on my nerves. "Mom thought the house was too much for you to handle right now. All these memories. It is morbid. Really, we hired a crew to help clear out the clutter." Clutter. I stepped between the movers and the mantelpiece. "This is my father's house. Nothing leaves." Darlene sighed, a theatrical exhale of patience she did not possess. She picked up a crystal vase one my biological mother had bought in Italy 30 years ago and held it up to the light, checking for dust. "Technically," she said, setting the vase back down a few inches to the left of where it belonged, a subtle assertion of dominance. "It is the estate's house, and as the surviving spouse, I have a duty to secure the assets. We are just moving some of the more valuable items to storage, for safekeeping. You know how break-ins happen when people know a house is empty." "I am living here," I said, my voice hardening. "It is not empty." "For now," Mason muttered. He walked over to the coffee table and tossed a thick manila envelope onto the polished wood. The slap of the paper echoed in the quiet room. "Sit down, Lillian," Mason said. He did not ask. He ordered. I remained standing. "I am fine right here." Mason shrugged and sat down on my father's favorite armchair. He kicked his feet up onto the coffee table, his heels resting right next to the envelope. It was a small gesture, but it was a calculated desecration. He knew that was the one rule my father had: no shoes on the furniture. Mason was marking his territory. "We have a proposition," Mason said. "Mom and I have been talking. We know you are stressed. We know you have your own health issues with that surgery coming up, running a company like Crestwell, dealing with the unions, the contracts, the legal mess. It is too much for a girl like you." "A girl like me," I repeated, feeling the cold anger starting to replace my grief. "I have been the director of operations for 5 years. Mason, you have never held a job for longer than 6 months. Darlene tutted, walking over to adjust a picture frame on the wall, tilting it slightly crooked. Now, no need to be nasty. Mason is just trying to look out for his stepsister." "The offer is inside." Mason gestured to the envelope with his chin. "We are willing to buy you out. A clean break. You walk away from the company, the house, the land, everything. In exchange, we give you a cash settlement, $150,000, tax-free." I stared at him. The company alone had assets in the millions. The house was worth $800,000 in this market. "That is insulting," I said flatly. "I am the executor of the will. Dad and I went over it 6 months ago. The company shares are split 60-40 in my favor to ensure operational control. The house is mine. You and Darlene get the insurance policies and the liquid cash accounts. That was the arrangement." Mason smiled. It was a slow, stretching movement that did not reach his eyes. "Yeah, about that," he said. "Dad wrote a new one." The air left the room. "What?" "About 3 weeks ago," Darlene chimed in, now examining the silver tea set on the sideboard. "When his heart started acting up again, he was very distressed. Lillian, he felt that you were unstable, too emotional. He told us he was worried you would run the business into the ground." "That is a lie," I said. "I spoke to him every day." He didn't want to hurt your feelings, Mason said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a photocopy. Here is the summary page, notarized and everything. I snatched the paper from his hand. My eyes scanned the text rapidly. It was legal jargon, standard boilerplate, but the clauses were devastating. Revocation of all prior testaments. Sole beneficiary Darlene Kincaid, administrator Mason Kincaid, and then I looked at the bottom. There was my father's signature, Robert J. Parker. It looked right. The slant was correct. The pressure points on the downstrokes matched his heavy hand. To a layman, it was perfect. But I was not a layman. I was the daughter who had countersigned thousands of checks and contracts with him. My father had a tic, a habit born from 40 years of signing construction documents in a hurry. When he wrote the letter P in Parker, he never closed the loop at the bottom. It always hovered just a millimeter above the stem. And he always, without fail, crossed his double T in Robert with a single, long strike that trailed off slightly upward. I looked closely at the photocopy. The P was fully closed, a perfect textbook loop, and the cross on the T was straight as an arrow, ending abruptly. This wasn't a signature written by a dying man with shaky hands. This was a signature drawn by someone trying to be perfect. This is a forgery, I whispered. Careful, Mason warned, his voice dropping an octave. That is a serious accusation. Dad never closed his P's, I said, looking up at him. And he hasn't updated his will since January. Attorney Merritt would have told me. Merritt is old and senile, Mason scoffed. Dad used a mobile notary. He wanted it done quietly so you wouldn't make a scene. You know how you get. Darlene walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. Her palm was cold. Honey, denial is a stage of grief. We understand. But the law is the law. Mason stood up, towering over me. Here is the reality check. Lillian, you can fight this if you want. You can drag it out in probate court for 3 years. The legal fees will bankrupt you. We have control of the accounts as of this morning. You have no access to company funds. You have no salary coming in. Can you afford a 3-year war? He leaned in close. Or you can take the $150 grand, sign the waiver, and go live your life somewhere else. You have 24 hours, Darlene added pleasantly, as if she were telling me how long I had to return a library book. After that, the offer is off the table, and we will evict you from this house. Get out, I said. My voice was shaking, not from sadness, but from rage. Get out of my house. Our house, Mason corrected. He signaled to the movers. Let's go. Boys, we will come back for the big stuff on Friday. He stopped at the door and looked back at me. 150,000. Lillian, don't be stupid. You are already sick. Don't make yourself homeless, too. When the door finally clicked shut, the silence that rushed back in was terrifying. I did not cry. I went straight to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and went into the pantry, the only room with no windows. I dialed a number I had memorized years ago. This is Price, a gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Evelyn Price was 70 years old. She had spent 30 years as a forensic auditor for the state, and another 10 doing private consulting for my father. She was the woman who found the embezzlement scheme in the frantic 90s when everyone else missed it. She smoked cheap cigarettes and had a mind like a steel trap. Evelyn, it is Lillian, I said. They made a move. There was a pause, the sound of a lighter clicking, and a long exhale. The step witch and the fail son. Yes, they came to the house. They have a new will. Evelyn, the signature is wrong. The loop on the P is closed. Amateurs, Evelyn grunted. Did they offer you a settlement? 150,000, cash, if I sign a waiver within 24 hours. Standard play, Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, grounding me. Listen to me closely. Lillian, do not sign a napkin. Do not sign a birthday card. If they are offering you cash fast, it means they are liquidity poor. They need you out of the way to liquidate the big assets. They are rushing. They said they have control of the accounts, I said, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold pantry floor. They might have frozen them, but they can't drain them yet, not without probate clearing. That takes time unless— She trailed off. Unless they have someone on the inside fast-tracking the death certificate and the executor status. What do? I feel like I'm drowning. You stall, Evelyn commanded. You tell them you are thinking about it. You play the sick, confused daughter, make them think they have won. Meanwhile, I am going to make some calls. I still have the back-end passwords for the Crestwell payroll server. If they are moving money, I will see the ripples. Thank you, Evelyn. Lillian. Her tone sharpened. Lock your doors. Put a chair under the handle. People who forge wills don't stop at paper crimes. They are scared, and scared people are dangerous. That night, I did exactly as she said. I deadbolted the doors. I jammed a heavy oak chair under the front knob. I took my father's old baseball bat and leaned it against the nightstand. Sleep was impossible. I drifted in and out of a feverish doze, my body fighting the stress and the physical pain of my condition. Sometime around 3 a.m, I woke up with a start. I didn't know what had woken me. The house was silent. The wind was howling softly outside, rattling the old window frames. I reached for my phone on the nightstand to check the time. My hand grasped empty air. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat up, fumbling in the darkness. I remembered distinctly placing the phone on the right side of the lamp, face down, plugged into the charger. I switched on the lamp. My phone was there, but it was on the left side of the lamp, face up, and the charging cable was unplugged. I stared at it, the blood draining from my face. I lived alone. I had locked every door. I had wedged the chair. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers. It was unlocked. I never left it unlocked. The background apps showed the photos gallery had been opened, along with my banking app. Someone had been in my room. While I was sleeping, they had stood over my bed, watched me breathe, and gone through my digital life. I looked at the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar. I always closed it to keep the heat in. Evelyn was right. They weren't just coming for the money. They were already here, and the walls of the house I grew up in could no longer protect me. The police officer at the hospital had been kind, but his hands were tied. He took my statement, photographed the bruising that was already blooming across my cheekbone like a storm cloud, and assured me that a warrant would be issued. But the legal system is a slow, grinding machine, and money is the grease that makes it spin faster for some than for others. By the time the doctors discharged me, stating that my surgical incision was irritated but intact, I received a notification on my phone. Mason had been processed and released on bail. It had taken less than 3 hours. He was out walking the streets before the swelling on my face had even gone down. I took a cab back to my father's house. I did not have the energy to feel fear anymore. I only felt a heavy, numb exhaustion. I just wanted to go into my room, lock the door, and sleep until the world made sense again. The taxi pulled up to the curb, and for a second, I thought the driver had taken me to the wrong address. The house, the stately colonial brick home where I had learned to walk, where I had nursed my father through his final months, looked different. It was subtle at first. The porch lights were off. Even though dusk was settling in, the blinds were drawn tight, sealing the house like a tomb. I paid the driver and walked up the driveway, my steps slow and painful. I reached into my purse for my keys, the familiar weight of the brass keychain offering a small comfort. I climbed the 3 steps to the front porch, slid the key into the lock, and turned. It stopped. I frowned, jiggling it slightly. Sometimes the old tumblers got stuck. I tried again, applying a little more pressure. It would not budge. I pulled the key out and looked at it, then looked at the lock. The brass faceplate was shiny, new, not a scratch on it. My stomach dropped. I rang the doorbell. Silence. I pounded on the wood with the flat of my hand, the vibration jarring my sore arm. Mason, Darlene, open this door. Nothing. I stepped back, looking up at the second-floor windows. Darkness. They were likely not even here. They had changed the locks and left, sealing me out of my own home like a stray dog. I walked around the side of the house, thinking I could try the back door or the basement window Evelyn and I had discussed. That was when I heard the sound. Thwip, thwip, thwip. The automatic sprinkler system had kicked on. I rounded the corner to the side yard, and my breath hitched in my throat. There, scattered across the manicured Kentucky bluegrass, was my life. It was not just a few boxes. It was a chaotic, malicious explosion of my personal belongings. My clothes were strewn in muddy heaps, silk blouses tangling with denim, all of it soaking up the spray from the oscillating sprinkler heads. My filing cabinet had been dumped out, leaving a sodden trail of paperwork, my medical records, my tax returns, my college diploma plastered against the wet grass. I ran forward, ignoring the pain in my abdomen, ignoring the cold water that immediately soaked my shoes. "No," I whispered, falling to my knees in the mud. I reached for a leather-bound book lying open near the rose bushes. It was a photo album. The water was pooling on the pages, dissolving the adhesive. I tried to wipe it dry, but the damage was done. A photo of my father holding me on my 5th birthday was already warping, the ink bleeding until his face was just a smear of colors. I scrambled to gather what I could, my hands shaking uncontrollably. They had thrown out my laptop, my coat, the quilt my grandmother made. Then I saw it. Near the edge of the driveway, on the hard concrete, lay the shattered remains of a cedar wood box. I froze. The water from the sprinkler hit my back, cold and relentless, but I couldn't move. That box had belonged to my mother, my biological mother, who died when I was 12. It was the one thing I had kept on the highest shelf of my closet, safe from everything. It held her engagement ring, her pearl necklace, and the locket she wore every day. The box had not just been dropped, it had been smashed. The wood was splintered, as if someone had taken a hammer to it or thrown it with significant force against the pavement. I crawled over to the concrete. The velvet lining was torn, the pearls were gone, the string broken, scattering white beads into the grass where I would never find them all. The engagement ring was missing, but the locket was there. It was dented, the hinge twisted, lying in a puddle of dirty water. I picked it up, clutching it to my chest, and a sound escaped me that I didn't recognize. It wasn't a cry. It was a keen, a raw sound of grief that felt like it was tearing my throat apart. They hadn't just evicted me. They had tried to erase me. They wanted to destroy not just my future, but my history. "Lillian." The voice was a harsh whisper. I looked up, wiping rain and tears from my eyes. Mrs. Rowe, the neighbor from next door, was standing by the hedge that separated our properties. She was 75 years old, usually seen tending to her hydrangeas, but now she looked terrified. She was wearing a raincoat over her nightgown, clutching a pair of shears. "Mrs. Rowe," I choked out, trying to stand but finding my legs too weak. "Hush, child," she hissed, looking toward my father's house as if the windows had ears. She reached through the gap in the hedge and grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Come here, quickly, out of the light." I stumbled toward her, dragging my feet. She pulled me into the shadow of her large oak tree, away from the streetlights. "I saw them," she whispered, her eyes wide behind her glasses. "That woman and her son. They were laughing. Lillian, throwing your things like it was garbage day. I wanted to call the police, but—" She trailed off, looking ashamed. I was scared. That boy, the look in his eyes, it is not right. "It's okay, Mrs. Rowe," I said, shivering as the adrenaline began to fade, leaving me cold and wet. "Thank you for checking on me. Listen to me," she said, pulling me closer. She looked around again, paranoid. "You need to know something. Your father, he came to see me, about a week before he passed." I stiffened. "My father came to your house. He came to the back door." She nodded rapidly. "He looked terrible. Poor man. Pale as a sheet. He asked to borrow my landline phone. He said he couldn't use his—" "Why?" I asked, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. Mrs. Rowe leaned in until her lips were inches from my ear. "He said they were listening. He said he heard clicking sounds on the line. He said he found a device behind the headboard of his bed. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My father wasn't just sick. He was being surveilled, in his own home. "Did he call anyone?" I asked. "He called a lawyer," she said. "Not the usual one. A different name. Calvin. I think," he spoke very quietly. "He told him I have the proof. It is in the safe. Come get it on Monday." Monday. He died on Wednesday. "Did he say anything else?" "He said," Mrs. Rowe hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "He said he made a mistake letting them in. He said the medicine they were giving him made his head foggy, but he stopped taking it that morning, and he could finally think." My blood ran cold. Mason had volunteered to handle Dad's medication schedule 2 months ago. He claimed he wanted to step up and help. We thought he was finally maturing. But if Dad stopped taking the meds and suddenly got clarity, what exactly were they feeding him? "You have to go," Mrs. Rowe said, pushing a $20 bill into my wet hand. "Don't stay here, if they come back and see you." "I have somewhere to go," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Thank you, Mrs. Rowe. You have no idea how much you just helped me." I left my ruined belongings on the lawn. I had the locket. That was all that mattered. The rest was just stuff. And right now, I didn't need clothes. I needed answers. I took another cab to Evelyn Price's house. It was a small, sturdy bungalow on the other side of town, surrounded by a high fence. Evelyn didn't ask questions when she opened the door and saw me soaking wet, holding a broken locket. She just pulled me inside, locked the door with 3 separate deadbolts, and went to get a towel. "We are going to nail them," Evelyn said later, sitting at her kitchen table while I shivered in a borrowed oversized sweater. "If Robert was lucid enough to call a lawyer, that means the cognitive decline they claimed in the medical report was induced. That is homicide, Lillian, or at least manslaughter." "We need the proof," I said, staring at the steam rising from my tea. "Mrs. Rowe said he put it in the safe, but the house is locked down." "We will get in," Evelyn said grimly. "I know that house better than they do, but tonight, you sleep, you look like a ghost." I slept on Evelyn's pull-out couch. It was not a restful sleep. Every shadow looked like Mason. Every sound sounded like breaking glass. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, a noise jolted me awake. It was a metallic screeching sound, metal on metal. I sat up, my heart leaping into my throat. The sound was coming from the side of the house, the garage door. "Evelyn," I whispered, scrambling off the couch. Evelyn was already in the hallway. She was holding a heavy mag-light flashlight like a baton. "I hear it," she said calmly. "Stay back." She moved to the window and peered through the blinds. "Someone is trying to jimmy the garage lock." She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She picked up her phone and dialed 911. "Intruder on the premises, 342 Oak Street, 2 women inside. I am armed." The screeching sound stopped abruptly. Then, there was the sound of footsteps running down the driveway, heavy, frantic steps slapping against the pavement. By the time the police cruiser flashed its lights against the living room wall, the street was empty. The officers searched the perimeter. They found scratch marks on the garage door where a crowbar had been used, but the intruder was gone. "Probably just kids," the younger officer said, shining his light around the yard. "We have had a few break-ins in the area." "It wasn't kids," I said, wrapping my arms around myself. "Come look at this," the older officer called out from the driveway. We walked out. The beam of his flashlight hit the white siding of Evelyn's garage. The paint was still wet, dripping down the wall in jagged red lines. It was a message. 4 words sprayed in hasty, violent block letters. "Stop, or you're next." I stared at the words. The red paint looked like blood in the harsh light of the police cruiser. This wasn't a property dispute anymore. It wasn't about inheritance. They knew we were digging. They knew about the phone call. The police took a report, took photos of the graffiti, and promised to increase patrols. But as they drove away, leaving us in the silence of the pre-dawn hours, I knew patrols wouldn't stop Mason. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat by the window, watching the street. At 8 in the morning, a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. Mason stepped out. He looked fresh, rested, wearing a crisp polo shirt and sunglasses. He didn't come to the door. He just stood on the sidewalk, leaning against his car, looking at the house. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. Evelyn stood right behind me. Mason took off his sunglasses. He smiled a wide, bright, terrifyingly empty smile. "Rough night," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. He gestured vaguely toward the garage where the red paint had been scrubbed but was still faintly visible. "Vandalism is getting terrible in this city. You two ladies should be careful. It is not safe for single women alone." "What do you want, Mason?" I asked, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "Just came to give you a friendly update," he said, examining his fingernails. "We found a buyer for the house, cash offer. Should close by the end of the week. So, don't worry about coming back to get your trash off the lawn. We will have it hauled away." He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. The smile vanished. "You know, Lillian," he said, his voice dropping to that flat, conversational tone that was scarier than any shout. "I was looking at flight prices. One-way tickets to Florida are very cheap right now. Beautiful weather. Good place to start over. If I were you, I would take a trip today." "Is that a threat?" Evelyn barked. "It is travel advice." Mason shrugged, putting his sunglasses back on. "Because this town. It is bad for your health. Accidents happen all the time. Slippery floors, faulty brakes, gas leaks." He opened his car door. "Think about it. Sis, you have nothing left here anyway." He got in and drove away slowly, ensuring I saw his license plate. I watched him go. He thought he had won. He thought fear would make me run. He thought that by breaking my mother's box and painting threats on my friend's wall, he could break my spirit. But he had made a miscalculation. I looked at the faint red letters on the garage wall. "You're next." "He is right," I said to Evelyn. "I am next." Evelyn looked at me, worried. "Lillian." "I am next," I repeated, turning to go back inside. "I am the next person who is going to walk into that house, tonight." "We are going in?" Evelyn asked. "We are going in," I confirmed. "And we aren't leaving until we find what he is so afraid of us seeing." The adrenaline from the morning confrontation with Mason eventually faded, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. We were not going to run. We were going to dig. Evelyn cleared her dining room table, pushing aside a half-finished jigsaw puzzle of a lighthouse to make room for the real work. She brought out a laptop that looked like a relic from the early 2000s, thick as a brick and humming like a lawnmower. But I knew better than to judge it. Evelyn Price did not trust the cloud. She trusted hard drives she could physically destroy if necessary. "Make coffee," she ordered, plugging in an Ethernet cable. "Strong? If we are going to do this, I need my heart rate to match my anxiety levels." I brewed a pot of dark roast while the sound of her typing filled the small kitchen. It was a rhythmic, aggressive clatter. Evelyn had been the external auditor for Crestwell Civil & Stone for 15 years before she retired. She knew where the bodies were buried because she was usually the one who had forced my father to dig them up and give them a proper burial. She was the reason our books were clean, or at least, they were supposed to be. "You really think you can get in?" I asked, placing a steaming mug next to her mouse hand. "Mason said he changed the passwords." Evelyn snorted, a sound that was equal parts amusement and disdain. "Mason Kincaid changes passwords like he changes his socks, rarely and with poor hygiene. Besides, I am not going through the front door. I installed a backdoor administrative access key 7 years ago when the server crashed. Your father knew about it. He called it the Doomsday Key. Well, looks like Doomsday is here." She hit the enter key with a flourish. A wall of code scrolled down the screen, followed by the familiar blue and white interface of the Crestwell Internal Financial Database. "We are in," she said, taking a long sip of coffee. Now, let us see what the little prince has been spending his allowance on. For the first hour, it was boring. It was just rows and columns of numbers, the heartbeat of a construction firm, materials, labor, insurance, fuel, but Evelyn read spreadsheets like other people read novels. She was looking for the plot twist. Here, she said, pointing a manicured fingernail at the screen. Look at the vendor list for the last 18 months. I leaned in, squinting at the glow. I don't see anything, just the usual suppliers, cement, steel, lumber. Look closer at the subcontractors, she said. Specifically, this one, North Star Logistics. I frowned. I know that name. We use them for hauling debris. Do we? Evelyn clicked on the vendor profile. Because according to this, we have paid them $45,000 in the last 3 months alone. That is a lot of debris. Lillian. But look at the invoice template. She pulled up a PDF. It was generic. No logo, no itemized list of hours or weight, just a flat fee. Services rendered, $5,000. Now look at this one, she said, opening another file. JEM, Consulting, different name, same font, same lack of logo, same flat fee structure. Services rendered, $4,200. Coincidence? I asked, though I already knew the answer. There are no coincidences in accounting, Evelyn said darkly. Only laziness. Look at the address for North Star. I pulled out my phone and typed in the address listed on the invoice. It is a strip mall in Nevada, I said, scrolling through the street view. It is a UPS store. And JM. Consulting. I typed in the second address, a virtual office in Delaware. Ghost vendors, Evelyn declared. He is setting up shell companies and billing the firm for work that never happens. It is the oldest trick in the book. He keeps the amounts under $10,000 to avoid triggering an automatic flag from the bank. But he does it frequently enough that it adds up. She started typing rapidly again, pulling up a summary report. Let's see the total damage. The screen refreshed. My stomach dropped. Over $200,000, I whispered. In 18 months. That is just the vendor fraud, Evelyn said, her face grim. That is his walking around money. That is how he pays for the sports cars and the watches. But $200,000 doesn't explain why he is desperate to sell the company. You don't kill the golden goose just because you stole a few golden eggs. You only kill it if you're about to get caught doing something much worse. She switched tabs to the payroll department. This was the part that scared me the most. My father had built the pension fund with his own blood and sweat. He treated his foreman like family. Oh, Robert, Evelyn sighed, her voice softening for the first time. He trusted them too much. What is it? I asked. Ghost employees, she said. I am seeing 3 names on the site manifest for the Harbor Point project. Thomas Wade, Eric Shelby, Marcus Dean. You know the crew chiefs on that job. Lillian, do you know these men? No, I said instantly. I know everyone on Harbor Point. I sign off on the safety certifications. I have never heard of them. Well, they are drawing salaries, Evelyn said. Full union rates, plus overtime, and the direct deposit routing numbers. They all go to the same bank branch in the Caymans. He is draining the operating capital, I said, feeling sick. But the pension is the pension safe. Evelyn hesitated. That pause was more terrifying than any scream. He hasn't rated the principal, she said slowly. He can't. That requires federal approval. But he has stopped making the employer matching contributions. For 6 months, he is diverting the match money into a holding account labeled litigation reserve. There is no litigation, I said. Exactly. It is a slush fund. He is starving the pension to feed his exit strategy. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, lighting a cigarette despite having quit 10 years ago. She kept a pack in the freezer for emergencies. This, apparently, qualified. But here's the thing that bothers me, she said, exhaling a plume of smoke. The timeline. Look at the graph. She pointed to a line chart she had generated. The blue line represented the fraudulent withdrawals. The red line represented my father's medical expenses. The lines moved in perfect synchronization. The theft started small. Evelyn analyzed, her voice clinical and cold. Just a few thousand here and there. That was 18 months ago. That was when your father first got the diagnosis, right? When he started feeling tired. Yes, I nodded. Then look at 6 months ago. She traced the spike in the blue line. The theft triples. He gets bolder. More ghost vendors. More fake employees. What happened 6 months ago? Dad had his first collapse, I said, my voice trembling. He was hospitalized for a week. That was when Mason offered to take over the daily bookkeeping to reduce his stress. And look at the last 3 weeks, Evelyn said, tapping the screen hard. The line goes vertical. He is looting the place. He is grabbing everything not nailed down. And that coincides with Dad dying, I finished. It coincides with your father realizing something was wrong, Evelyn corrected. Your father was not stupid. Lillian, he might have been sick, but he had an instinct for numbers. I think he caught Mason. She started clicking through the miscellaneous expense folder. I am looking for an anomaly, she muttered. Something that doesn't fit the pattern. If Mason is smart, he buried the evidence, but Mason is arrogant, and arrogant people leave receipts. What is this? I pointed to a recurring charge. Medlink Courier Services. I saw that, Evelyn said. $500 a week, every Friday. We don't use medical couriers, I said. We are a construction firm, unless someone gets hurt on site, and then it is an ambulance bill, not a courier. Evelyn opened the detail view for the transaction. It is billed to the Executive Wellness Program account, a program that does not exist. By the way, I am tracking the merchant ID. She typed the ID number into a separate search window. It is a legitimate courier service, she said. They specialize in transporting sensitive biological materials and pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals, I repeated. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the image of the numbers and summon the image of my father in those final days. He had been so confused. Some days he didn't know who I was. Other days, he was sharp as a tack, grabbing my hand, trying to tell me something. Mason had been the one administering the pills. Dad needs his rest, he would say. Dad is agitated. I gave him the sedative. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind, bright and searing. It was the night before he died. I was sitting by his bedside. Mason had gone out to take a call. My father had grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, his skin paper thin. He was trying to pull himself up. Lily, he had wheezed. The basement. I had thought he was rambling. It is okay, Dad. The basement is fine. No, he had insisted, his eyes wide and desperate. Behind the fuse box, the panel, Mom's birthday. Then Mason had walked back in. He is hallucinating again, Mason had said, his voice smooth and fake. Time for his booster. I opened my eyes. Evelyn, I said. The pills. What? Mason wasn't just stealing money, I said, the horror of it making me feel lightheaded. He was keeping Dad sick. He was using the courier to get something that wasn't prescribed by his cardiologist. He needed Dad incapacitated so he could sign the checks, and when Dad started to figure it out, he upped the dose, Evelyn finished. Or he stopped it completely to induce a crisis. I said, Mrs. Rose said Dad told her he stopped taking the medicine and his mind cleared up. That was his death sentence. Mason knew that if Dad recovered, he would go to jail for embezzlement, so he made sure Dad didn't recover. The room fell silent. The hum of the laptop seemed deafening now. We weren't looking at white-collar crime anymore. We were looking at a murder weapon made of spreadsheets. We have the pattern, Evelyn said, her voice low, but we don't have the smoking gun. This shows money moving. It doesn't prove the will is fake, and it doesn't prove the medication tampering. A jury might just see a messy business led by an incompetent son, not a predator. Dad left something, I said. He told me, Behind the fuse box in the basement, he said Mom's birthday. That is the combination. A safe, Evelyn realized. He installed a wall safe. He must have. He knew, Evelyn. He knew he was trapped in that house with them. He hid the evidence where he knew Mason would never look. Mason never goes into the basement. He says it smells like mold. If the evidence is in the house, Evelyn said, then we have a problem. They changed the locks, they have cameras, and after the little stunt with the graffiti, I guarantee you Mason is watching that place like a hawk. I don't care, I said. I stood up, pacing the small kitchen. If we don't get that evidence, they win. They sell the company, they destroy the pension, and they get away with killing my father. I am not letting that happen. Evelyn looked at me. She studied my face, the bruise on my cheek, the split lip. Then she looked at the screen, at the millions of dollars stolen from the men and women she had spent her career protecting. She closed the laptop with a snap. You are right, she said. Those people in that house, they are rushing, and people who are rushing make mistakes. They aren't afraid of lawsuits. Lillian, they have lawyers for that. They are afraid of being found out for something they can't undo. If Robert hid proof of the medication tampering, that is life in prison. That is why Mason is shaking. She stood up and walked to the junk drawer near the fridge. She rummaged around for a moment before pulling out a set of heavy iron keys and a small black device that looked like a garage door opener. What is that? I asked. This, Evelyn said, holding up the black device, is a signal jammer. I bought it online to stop my neighbor from flying his drone over my pool, but it works wonders on Wi-Fi security cameras. And this, she jingled the keys, is the key to the bulkhead door in your father's backyard, the one that leads directly into the basement. You have a key to my father's basement. I have a key to every file cabinet and every back door in that man's life, Evelyn said with a grim smile. He gave it to me 20 years ago when I had to sneak in to audit the personal accounts during his divorce from his second wife. He never asked for it back. She tossed me the keys. I caught them, the cold iron heavy in my palm. We are not just going to break in, Evelyn said, grabbing her car keys. We are going to execute a raid, but we have to do it tonight, before he sells the house, before he finds that safe. I looked at the clock. It was 9 in the evening. Darkness had fallen. Let's go, I said. One more thing, Evelyn said, stopping me at the door. If we get caught inside, it is breaking and entering. It is a felony. We could go to jail while Mason walks free. I am already losing everything, I said, feeling the anger burn hot and bright in my chest. I might as well lose it fighting. Evelyn nodded, satisfied. Good answer. Drive fast. Lillian, we have a ghost to catch. The silence of the suburbs at 2 a.m. is a heavy, judgmental thing. It is not peaceful. It is watchful. Every rustle of leaves sounds like a footstep, and every distant car engine sounds like a police siren. We parked Evelyn's car 3 blocks away, under the shadow of a large, weeping willow. We walked the rest of the distance in the grass, avoiding the sidewalks where our heels might click against the concrete. Evelyn was dressed in black, a tracksuit that looked like it belonged in a cat burglar movie from the 80s. But on her, it just looked efficient. In her hand, she clutched the signal jammer, a small box with a green light that blinked rhythmically, scrambling the Wi-Fi signal of the cameras Mason had installed. We reached the back of my father's property. The house stood dark and massive, a silhouette against the moonless sky. It felt wrong to be sneaking up on the home where I had learned to ride a bike, treating it like an enemy fortress. The bulkhead key is sticky, Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. If we force it, the noise will carry. There is a window, I breathed back, pointing low to the ground near the foundation. Behind the hydrangeas. Dad meant to replace the latch 5 years ago, but never got around to it. He just wedged it shut with a piece of wood from the inside. We crept through the flower bed. The soil was damp, and the smell of wet earth and decaying mulch filled my nose. I knelt in the dirt, Ignoring the pain in my healing incision, I found the window. It was small, a narrow rectangle of glass caked in grime. I pushed against the frame. It held fast. "Let me," Evelyn hissed. She produced a thin, flat tool from her pocket, a putty knife. She slid it between the sash and the frame, wiggling it until I heard the soft thud of the wooden wedge falling onto the concrete floor inside. The window groaned as I pushed it open. I went first. I slid feet first into the darkness, my sneakers searching for the workbench that I knew sat directly beneath the window. I found it, landing with a soft scuff, and then helped Evelyn down. We were in. The smell hit me instantly. It wasn't the sterile, chemical smell of the hospital or the fake lavender air freshener Darlene used upstairs. It was the smell of my father. It was a rich, masculine blend of sawdust, motor oil, old paper, and the faint, sweet scent of the pipe tobacco he kept in a tin but rarely smoked. It was the smell of safety. It was the smell of the hours he spent down here, tinkering with broken toasters and reviewing blueprints, hiding from the noise of the world. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden, but I blinked them away. There was no time for grief. "The fuse box," Evelyn whispered, clicking on a small penlight. She kept the beam low, sweeping it across the concrete floor. The basement was a labyrinth of shadows. The furnace loomed like a dormant beast in the corner. We moved toward the far wall, past the shelves lined with jars of nails and screws, organized by size, another testament to my father's meticulous mind. The fuse box was gray and industrial, mounted flush against the drywall. "He said behind it," Evelyn asked, shining the light on the metal door. "He said behind the panel," I confirmed. I opened the door to the breaker box. The switches were all labeled in my father's neat, blocky handwriting: kitchen, master bed, garage. I ran my fingers along the inside edge of the metal frame. There, hidden near the main shutoff, was a small, almost invisible latch. I pulled it. The entire breaker panel swung outward on a hidden hinge. It wasn't just a fuse box. It was a false front. Behind it, embedded into the foundation wall, was a safe. It was old, heavy steel, with a digital keypad that looked surprisingly modern. "Do you know the code?" Evelyn asked. The tension in her voice was tight as a wire. "He said, 'Mom's birthday,'" I whispered. I didn't hesitate. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly. I didn't type Darlene's birthday. I didn't type his birthday. I typed the date that Mason and Darlene had probably never bothered to memorize. 04/12/58, April 12th, 1958, the day my biological mother was born. The keypad beeped a cheerful, affirmative sound. The heavy lock clicked back with a satisfying thunk. I pulled the handle. The door swung open. Inside, there was no cash. There was no jewelry. My father knew those were the first things Mason would look for. Instead, there was a stack of documents and a small, silver USB drive. I pulled the stack out, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Is that it?" Evelyn asked, shining the light on the papers. I flipped to the first document. It was a last will and testament, but it wasn't the photocopy Mason had waved in my face. This was on heavy, bonded paper. The blue ink of the signatures was real, indented into the page. The notary stamp was embossed, raising the paper surface. "It is dated 3 weeks ago," I whispered, scanning the text. "Beneficiary Lillian Parker, sole executor Lillian Parker, Mason and Darlene are explicitly mentioned and explicitly excluded." "He disinherited them," Evelyn breathed. "He didn't just split it. He cut them out completely." Beneath the will was a thick file labeled Audit, Confidential. I opened it. It wasn't Evelyn's work. It was from a forensic accounting firm in Chicago. He hired outsiders, I realized. He didn't want to use anyone local. He knew Mason might have compromised the local contacts. The report was damning. It detailed everything Evelyn had suspected and more. Unauthorized transfers, shell companies. But the most chilling part was the handwritten note clipped to the front of the file. It was my father's handwriting, but it was shaky. the letters trailing off as if he were fighting to keep the pen steady. My dearest Lillian, if you are reading this, I have run out of time. I am sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want to put you in danger until I was sure. Mason is stealing from the company. But it is worse than that. I think Darlene is helping him. And I think they are doing something to my medicine. I feel foggy every time I eat the food she brings. When I skip a meal, I can think again. I have stopped taking the pills Mason gives me, but I'm hiding them in the planter so he thinks I took them. I am scared. Lilypad, I am scared they are going to kill me before I can get this to Calvin. Trust Evelyn. Trust Calvin Merritt. Do not sign anything. Take the company back. Protect the men. Love, Dad. A sob escaped my throat, harsh and jagged. He knew. He was lying in that bed, smiling at them, letting them feed him soup, and he knew they were killing him. The bravery of it broke me. The loneliness of it destroyed me. Lillian, Evelyn said sharply. She wasn't looking at the letter. She was looking at the bottom of the stack. Look at this. She pulled out a manila folder that looked older, worn at the edges. It was labeled Background Check, D. Kincaid. My father had investigated Darlene before he married her, or maybe after, when he started getting suspicious. I opened the folder. Inside were death certificates. 3 of them, Gerald Miller. Cause of death: myocardial infarction, age 52. Anthony Russo. Cause of death: stroke, age 58. Patrick Vance. Cause of death: heart failure, age 60. All 3 men were Darlene's previous husbands. All 3 had died within 2 years of marrying her. All 3 had significant life insurance policies. She is a black widow, Evelyn whispered, her face pale in the reflected light of the torch. Mason isn't just a greedy stepson, he is the apprentice. This is their business model. They murdered him, I said. The word felt heavy, like a stone dropping into a deep well. They didn't just let him die, they murdered him for the insurance and the company. The USB, Evelyn pointed. Check it. I picked up the small silver drive. I couldn't check it here. We didn't have a computer, but there was a sticky note attached to it. Voice recorder, May 10th. That was 2 days before he died, I said. I put the USB in my pocket. I put the papers inside my jacket, zipping it up to my chin. I felt like I was wearing armor. We had it. We had the motive, the method, and the true will. We have to go, Evelyn said. We need to get this to Detective Reyes immediately. I nodded, closing the safe door. I pushed the fuse box panel back into place. Click. The sound was soft, but in the silence of the basement, it echoed. And then we heard it. Above our heads, the floorboards creaked. It was a slow, deliberate sound. Creak, pause, creak. Evelyn killed the light instantly. The basement plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. We stood frozen, shoulder to shoulder, hardly daring to breathe. My heart was hammering so hard, I was terrified the sound of it would vibrate through the floor. The footsteps were in the kitchen, directly above us. They were not the heavy, stomping boots of the movers. They were soft, careful. Then, a door opened, the door to the basement stairs. A slice of light cut across the top of the staircase, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. I heard something, a voice said. It was Mason. His voice was not the loud, brash shout from the hospital. It was low, tense, and alert. It is probably just the house settling, Darlene's voice replied. She sounded closer. Maybe in the hallway. Or a rat. This place is old. Mason? No, Mason said. I heard a click. Down there. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the shallow, panicked breaths that wanted to escape. Go check then, Darlene said. Take the gun. The word hung in the air, cold and final. Gun. I felt Evelyn's hand grip my arm. Her fingers were digging in hard. We had no weapon. We had a putty knife and a signal jammer. If Mason came down those stairs, if he saw us, there would be no police report. There would be an accident, A tragic break-in where the intruder was shot in self-defense. A shadow fell across the slice of light at the top of the stairs. Mason was standing on the landing. He took one step down. The wood groaned under his weight. I squeezed my eyes shut. I thought of the papers against my chest. I thought of my father, alone in his room, hiding pills in the planter. Please, I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Please don't let him come down. Mason took another step. "Hello?" he called out. "If someone is down there, I am armed." Silence. The basement held its breath. We were trapped. The window was too high to climb out of quickly without making noise. We were sitting ducks in the dark. Mason took a third step. He was coming down. The beam of a flashlight much stronger than ours swept across the bottom of the stairs, cutting through the darkness like a blade. It hit the workbench. It hit the furnace. It was inches away from where we were crouching behind the tool rack. I tightened every muscle in my body, preparing for the inevitable. I prepared to fight, but I didn't move. I stayed silent as a stone, waiting for the light to find me. We held our breath in the darkness of the basement for what felt like a lifetime. The beam of Mason's flashlight cut through the dust, slicing dangerously close to our hiding spot behind the industrial shelving. Above us, the floorboards groaned under his weight. I could hear him breathing a ragged, agitated sound. He stood there on the third step, debating whether to descend into the gloom he hated so much. Then, a sudden, scuttering noise saved us. A large rat, disturbed by the light, darted across the concrete floor near the furnace. "Ugh, disgusting," Mason muttered, his voice echoing in the stairwell. He backed up immediately. "Forget it. Nothing is down there but filth." We heard the heavy thud of the basement door slamming shut, followed by the slide of the deadbolt. He had locked us in. It was the best possible outcome. We waited in the cold silence for another 2 hours, shivering and clutching the evidence to our chests, before we dared to climb back out through the window and into the night. By 8 o'clock the next morning, we were no longer hiding in the shadows. We were sitting in the one place Mason Kincaid had no power to reach, the office of Calvin Merritt. Calvin's office was the antithesis of the modern, glass-walled headquarters Mason was trying to sell. It was located in a brownstone that smelled of old mahogany and legal precedents. Calvin himself was 70 years old, a man who wore three-piece suits and refused to retire because, as he put it, he had too many clients he actually liked. He sat behind his massive oak desk, reading the letter my father had written. The silence in the room was absolute. Evelyn was pacing by the window, smoking an electronic cigarette she had dug out of her purse. I sat in the leather client chair, my hands folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Calvin finished reading. He took off his reading glasses and placed them gently on top of the paper. When he looked up, his eyes were wet, but his jaw was set like granite. "Robert knew," Calvin said softly. "He knew, and he couldn't get to a phone." "He got to a phone once," I said. "He called Mrs. Rowe, but by then the damage was done," Calvin finished. He picked up the heavy bonded document, the real will. "This, however, changes the entire battlefield. This is the document I drafted for him 3 years ago, with the amendments we discussed last Christmas. It is watertight. Lillian, the trust structure, the executor appointment, it is all here." "What about the one Mason showed me?" I asked. "The one with the closed loop on the signature?" Calvin let out a scoff that was more of a bark. "I made a few calls while you were parking the car. I looked up the notary stamp on the copy Mason filed with the probate clerk yesterday. The notary is a man named Silas Vance. His license was revoked 2 years ago for fraud. He is a ghost notary. Lillian. He stamps anything for $500 cash. That will is not worth the paper it is printed on." "So we can stop the sale?" I asked, hope blooming in my chest for the first time in weeks. "We can do more than stop the sale," a new voice said from the doorway. I turned. A woman was standing there. She was in her 40s, wearing a sharp blazer and practical boots. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie humanity had to offer. "Lillian, Evelyn," Calvin gestured. This is Detective Alana Reyes. I took the liberty of calling her the moment you showed me the medical logs. Detective Reyes didn't smile. She walked into the room and extended a hand. Her grip was firm, dry, and reassuring. I worked the Vanderbilt case last year, Reyes said, sitting down next to me. And the horrific elder abuse ring at the Sunnyvale facility, I know exactly what kind of people we are dealing with. Let me see the USB drive. I handed her the silver drive we had retrieved from the safe. She plugged it into her laptop. We listened to the recording. My father's voice filled the room, thin and wheezing, but unmistakably his. It is May 10th. Mason gave me the yellow pills again. He says they are vitamins, but my heart, it feels like it is fluttering. I tried to skip them yesterday, and I could think clearly. Today, he watched me swallow. If I die, check the courier logs. Medlink. Check Medlink. The recording ended. My heart was breaking all over again, but Detective Reyes looked energized. Medlink, she repeated, typing furiously. That confirms it. Confirms what? Evelyn asked, stopping her pacing. We have been tracking a black market prescription ring operating out of the tri-state area, Reyes explained, her voice clipping along with professional efficiency. They siphon controlled substances, mostly potent heart medications and opiates, from hospice centers and resell them, or in special cases, they supply specific cocktails to people who want to induce medical crises in their relatives without leaving a toxicological trace that shows up on a standard autopsy. She turned the laptop screen toward us. It showed a web of transactions. The payment Evelyn found in the company books that $500 a week. Reyes pointed to a node on the chart. That connects directly to a shell account we have been watching. Mason wasn't just buying drugs. He was subscribing to a murder service. Oh my God, I whispered. So the person in the hospital is the supplier, Reyes nodded. Someone with access to the pharmacy inventory. Someone who knows exactly how to mix a beta blocker with a diuretic to cause gradual organ failure that looks like natural causes. The room fell silent. The scope of it was terrifying. This wasn't just a family tragedy. It was organized crime. I want him arrested, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I want you to go to that house and put handcuffs on him and his mother right now. We have enough for a warrant, Calvin agreed, reaching for his phone. I can have a judge sign an emergency injunction to freeze the assets and an arrest warrant for forgery and fraud within the hour. No, Reyes said sharply. We all looked at her. If we arrest Mason today, Reyes said, leaning forward, we get him for forgery, maybe fraud. The medical tampering is harder to prove without the physical pills to test against the autopsy samples. We need the pills he hid, but more importantly, if we grab Mason now, Darlene will claim ignorance. She will say she didn't know what her son was doing. She will play the grieving widow, take the insurance money, and disappear to an island with no extradition treaty, and the contact at the hospital. They will burn the records and vanish. So what are you saying? Evelyn asked, her eyes narrowing. We just let them sit in Robert's house. I am saying we don't want a battle, Reyes said, looking directly at me. We want a massacre. Legally speaking, we want to catch them all, the son, the mother, and the supplier. How? I asked. We need them to feel safe. Reyes said, we need them to think they have won. When criminals think they have won, they get sloppy. They make calls they shouldn't make. They meet in person to split the money. She pulled a folder from her bag. I have already secured a stealth warrant for the house based on the recording, Reyes continued. We are going to bug the landline and their cell signals, but I need you to buy us time. Lillian. Me. Calvin will file a temporary restraining order and a petition to contest the will. Reyes outlined the plan. But we will make it look weak, desperate. We won't mention the real will yet. We won't mention the audio recording. We will file a motion based on undue influence. It is a standard, flimsy argument. You want me to look like I am flailing. I realized. Exactly, Calvin chimed in, catching on. If we file the real will now, they will know we found the safe. They will panic and destroy evidence. But if we file a weak contest, They will laugh. They will think you are just a bitter daughter grasping at straws. And while they are laughing, Reyes added, they will proceed with the sale of the company. They will call their supplier to get the final payout, and that is when we catch them on tape admitting to everything. It is risky, Evelyn warned. Mason is volatile. You saw what he did at the hospital. I know, Reyes said softly. That is why we will have plainclothes officers watching you 24 hours a day. But Lillian, this is the only way to get justice for your father. Real justice. The kind that puts them away for life. Not just 5 years for forgery. I looked down at my hands. I thought about the slap in the waiting room. I thought about my mother's broken locket lying in the mud. I thought about my father, scared and alone, writing that letter in the basement. I didn't want to play the victim. I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops. I wanted to march into that house and throw the real Will in Mason's face. But that was ego. That was anger. Justice required discipline. Okay, I said, lifting my chin. I will do it. What do I have to do? You have to make a phone call, Reyes said. You have to call Mason. You have to sound defeated. You have to tell him you are filing a complaint. But you sound scared. Make him feel like the big man. Make him feel like the king of the castle. I can do that, I said. My voice was steady now, cold. Good, Calvin said. He turned to his computer and began typing rapidly. I am drafting the paperwork now. Petition to contest validity of testament based on lack of capacity. It is vague enough to be annoying, but not specific enough to alarm them about the safe. And the assets, Evelyn asked, if he sells the company tomorrow. I can put a temporary administrative hold on the bank accounts, Reyes said. It won't look like a police freeze. It will look like a standard compliance check. It will frustrate him. It will make him need cash fast. And when people need cash fast, they call their partners. The supplier, I said. Exactly, Reyes nodded. We squeeze the money. He calls the supplier for a loan or a payout, and we get the voice match. Reyes stood up and walked to the whiteboard on Calvin's wall. She picked up a marker and wrote 3 names, Mason Kincaid, Darlene Kincaid, unknown subject hospital. We are going fishing, Reyes said. And Lillian, you are the bait. One more thing, I said. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the small bottle of pills I had managed to swipe from the planter in the basement while Evelyn was checking the safe. I hadn't mentioned them until now because I wasn't sure if they were relevant, but seeing Reyes's determination, I knew they were the key. Dad hid these, I said, placing the amber bottle on the desk. He didn't take them. Are these enough for a lab test? Reyes's eyes widened. She picked up the bottle with a gloved hand. The label read, Lisinopril, 10 mg, standard blood pressure medication. If these are what I think they are, Reyes said, examining the capsules, they aren't lisinopril, or they have been crushed and repacked. We will send them to the lab immediately, Reyes said, sealing them in an evidence bag. If the toxicology comes back showing they contain something else, arsenic, digoxin, anything toxic, then we have attempted murder, and since your father died, we have murder. I watched the bag seal shut. That plastic bag held the final nail in Mason's coffin. Go home with Evelyn, Reyes instructed. Stay there. Do not go near your father's house. Let Calvin serve the papers, and wait for my signal to make the call. I stood up. My legs felt stronger than they had in weeks. The pain in my side was a distant, dull ache, overshadowed by the burning clarity of my mission. I won't just make the call, I said, looking at the team of people willing to fight for me. I will give the performance of a lifetime. He slapped you to shut you up, Evelyn said, handing me my coat. Now, we are going to use your voice to hang him. We walked out of the office and into the bright sunlight of the city. For the first time since my father died, the sun didn't feel glaring. It felt like a spotlight, and the stage was set. The phone in my hand felt heavier than a brick. It was a sleek, black object, but in that moment, it felt like a grenade with the pin pulled halfway out. I sat at Evelyn's kitchen table, staring at the contact name on the screen, Mason. I had spent the last 2 hours rehearsing this moment with Detective Reyes and Calvin. We had gone over the script until the words tasted like ash in my mouth. I had to be weak. I had to be broken. I had to be exactly the version of Lillian Parker that Mason Kincaid believed existed, the emotional, fragile daughter who crumbled under pressure. Remember, Reyes had told me before she left to set up the surveillance perimeter. He needs to believe he has already won. A man who thinks he has won stops looking for traps. Feed his ego. Lillian. Starve his suspicion. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of Evelyn's stale cigarette smoke and strong coffee. I looked at Evelyn. She gave me a sharp nod, her eyes hard and encouraging. I pressed the call button. The line rang once, twice. Well, Mason's voice oozed through the speaker. He didn't say hello. He didn't need to. I was wondering when you would realize you were out of options. I hope you're not calling to whine about the locks again. I let a silence hang in the air for 3 seconds, just long enough to simulate hesitation and fear. I forced a tremor into my voice, pitching it slightly higher, breathless, as if I had been crying. I can't do this anymore. Mason, I said. The police came by about the graffiti. My neighbors are looking at me like I'm a criminal. I am tired. I am just so tired. I told you, Mason said, his tone shifting from annoyance to a smug satisfaction. I told you to leave it alone. Lillian, you are not built for this. You are making a fool of yourself. I know, I whispered. You win. Okay, you win. I will sign the waiver. I will sign whatever you want. I just want it to stop. I heard him exhale a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. It wasn't that he was afraid of me. It was that he was annoyed by the effort of fighting me. To him, I was just a fly buzzing around his dinner. Now you are making sense, Mason said. I knew you would come around. $50,000. Lillian, it is enough to start over in some small town where nobody knows you. Wait, I said, injecting a note of desperate greed into my voice. This was the hook. You said $150,000 before. Price went down, Mason chuckled darkly. Consider it a late fee for being difficult. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Fine, 50, whatever, but I want one thing. Mason, please. The box. Mom's jewelry box. The one you smashed on the lawn. I couldn't find all the pearls. There was a ring. Please tell me you have the ring. That old junk? Mason scoffed. I might have swept it up. I will check the garage. If you sign, maybe I will be generous and give it back. He was dangling my mother's memory like a treat for a dog. It took every ounce of my self-control not to scream at him that I was going to bury him under the jail. Instead, I let out a shaky sigh. Okay, I said, but there is one more thing. What now? He snapped. Dad told me something, I said, choosing my words with surgical precision. A few months ago, when he was still lucid, he said there was a rainy day fund, an emergency account he set up years ago for Mom's treatments, but he never used it all. The line went silent. I could practically hear Mason's ears perking up. Money, hidden money, that was the only language he spoke fluently. What account? Mason asked, his voice sharp. I went through all his personal files. There is nothing. It wasn't in his name, I lied smoothly. He said he put it in a trust under her maiden name to keep it separate from the business liabilities. He said it was substantial. Mason, maybe $200,000 or $300,000. 300,000, Mason repeated. The greed in his voice was palpable. It was a physical thing, dripping through the phone line. Where's the paperwork? Lillian. I think I found the key to the safety deposit box in his desk, I said. But I don't know which bank. I was hoping if I give you the key, maybe we can split it. You get the company, you get the house. I just want half of that account. It would help me with the medical bills. Bring the key, Mason commanded instantly. We will discuss the split after I see the contents. He had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. He didn't question why I was telling him this. He didn't wonder if it was a trap. His narcissism blinded him to the possibility that I could outsmart him. He simply assumed that I was stupid enough to hand him another fortune in exchange for scraps. Okay, I said. Tomorrow morning, Mason said. 10 o'clock. Come to the Crestwell offices. I want to do this on my turf. And Lillian, don't bring that dinosaur lawyer of yours. If I see merit, the deal is off. I won't, I promised. But I can't come alone. I need moral support. Can I bring Evelyn? She is old. Mason, she just wants to make sure I get home safely. That old hag. Mason laughed. Fine, bring her. Maybe she can knit me a sweater while you sign your life away, but I am bringing my own witness. And a notary. We are going to make this ironclad. Okay, I said. Crestwell offices, 10 o'clock. Don't be late, he said. And Lillian, try to look presentable. I might have guests. He hung up. I lowered the phone and looked at Evelyn. He bit, I said. Evelyn crushed her cigarette into the ashtray with a vicious twist of her wrist. Of course he did. Rats always go for the cheese. Did he agree to the office? Yes, 10 o'clock. Good, Evelyn said. That gives Reyes time to prep the site. Now, let's practice. I need to work on my confused geriatric routine. I haven't played a senile old bat since I got out of a speeding ticket in 1998. I texted Detective Reyes immediately. It is on. Crestwell HQ, 10 a.m. He is bringing a notary and a witness. He took the bait on the phantom account. Reyes replied within seconds. Copy that. We will have audio in the conference room by midnight tonight. Wear the wire anyway. We need redundancy. Who is the witness? I didn't know. But 20 minutes later, my phone pinged with a notification from Instagram. It was a tag. I opened the app. It was a story posted by Lila Quinn. Mason's on-again, off-again girlfriend. Lila was 24, aspiring to be a lifestyle influencer, and possessed an intellect that could be rivaled by a well-trained golden retriever. The video showed Lila standing in what was clearly my father's office at Crestwell. She had rearranged the furniture. She was holding a color swatch against the wall. Big day tomorrow, she chirped, doing a little spin. Mason is finally signing the papers to take full ownership. The takeover is official. I'm going to be there to film the whole historic moment for the vlog. Boss Babe New Era Empire. I showed the screen to Evelyn. You have got to be kidding me, Evelyn said, adjusting her glasses. She is going to live stream a felony. She thinks she is filming a coronation, I said. She has no idea she's about to be the prosecution's star videographer. I forwarded the screenshot to Reyes. The witness is Lila Quinn. She plans to film it. Reyes sent back a single thumbs-up emoji. It was the most professional yet satisfying response I could have hoped for. The rest of the day was a blur of nervous energy. I couldn't sit still. I paced Evelyn's small living room until I had worn a path in the carpet. Every time I stopped, the pain in my side flared up, a sharp reminder of my physical vulnerability, but strangely, the pain helped. It kept me focused. It kept me angry. That evening, Evelyn made tea and forced me to eat a sandwich. You need fuel, she scolded. You can't bring down a criminal empire on an empty stomach. It is unladylike. I am not a lady, Evelyn, I said, taking a bite. I am a vengeful daughter. Same thing, she winked. Now, listen to me. Tomorrow, when we walk in there, Mason is going to try to intimidate you. He is going to use his size. He is going to use his voice. He might even touch you again. I flinched involuntarily. If he touches you, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a low growl, you let him. You let the camera see it. You let the microphone hear it. Do not fight back physically. You are not a soldier tomorrow. Lillian, you are a mirror. You reflect everything back at him so the world can see it. I know, I said. I am ready. Also, Evelyn added, when I start asking stupid questions about the thermostat or his shoes, don't look at me like I'm crazy. Roll your eyes, act embarrassed by me. Make him feel like we are a joke. If he respects us, he will be guarded. If he thinks we are pathetic, he will get loose. He already thinks we are pathetic, I said. Good. Let's keep it that way until the handcuffs click. I went to bed early, but sleep was impossible. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, I could hear the wind outside. The same wind that was blowing past my father's house, the house that was currently being occupied by the people who killed him. I got up and went to the bathroom. I turned on the harsh vanity light and looked at myself in the mirror. The bruise on my cheek was changing color. It had gone from a dark, angry purple to a sickly yellow-green. It was ugly. It distorted my face. I traced the outline of it with my fingertip. Mason had put this mark on me because he thought it would silence me. He thought violence was the ultimate authority. He didn't understand that violence is actually a confession. It is what people resort to when they have run out of intelligent options. "You better start signing," he had yelled. I looked at my reflection. My eyes were tired. Dark circles smudged underneath them. My hair was messy. I looked like a victim, but then I straightened my spine. I lifted my chin. I practiced the look I would give him right before the end. "I will start signing. Mason," I whispered to the empty room, "I will sign your arrest warrant." My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from an unknown number. I knew it was Reyes. "Audio is hot. We are inside the building. Teams are staged in the parking lot and the server room. Go get him." I turned off the light. The darkness didn't feel scary anymore. It felt like cover. The next morning, the sky was a brilliant, hard blue. It was a perfect day for a trap. Evelyn drove us to the industrial park where Crestwell Civil and Stone had its headquarters. The building was a 2-story brick structure that my father had designed himself. It was sturdy, practical, and honest, everything Mason was not. We parked the car. I adjusted the collar of my shirt, checking for the third time that the tiny microphone taped to my sternum was hidden. "Ready?" Evelyn asked. She had put on a brightly colored floral scarf and was carrying a large, ridiculous handbag that made her look like a confused tourist. "Ready," I said. We walked up the front steps. The receptionist, a new girl I didn't recognize, Mason must have fired old Mrs. Higgins, looked up, popped her gum, and pointed to the conference room without a word. I pushed open the heavy double doors. The conference room was imposing. A long mahogany table stretched down the center. At the far end, sitting in my father's chair, was Mason. He looked like he was posing for a magazine cover. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. His hair was slicked back. To his right sat a man I assumed was the notary, a sweaty, nervous-looking guy with a cheap briefcase, and to his left, bouncing on her heels and holding a phone on a gimbal stabilizer, was Lila. "And here she is," Lila narrated to her phone, panning the camera toward me as I walked in. "The stepsister. Coming to sign the deal. Say hi to the live stream, Lillian." She shoved the phone in my face. I didn't slap it away. I ducked my head, looking at the floor, playing the part. "Please, I don't want to be on camera." "Oh, don't be shy." Lila laughed, pulling back but keeping the lens focused on me. "It is a celebration." Mason stood up. He didn't offer a hand. He just pointed to the chair at the opposite end of the table. "Sit," he commanded. I sat. Evelyn shuffled in behind me, looking around the room with wide, bewildered eyes. "Oh my," Evelyn said, her voice quavering. "Is this the place? It is so chilly in here. Do you have a heater, young man?" Mason rolled his eyes, looking at Lila as if to say, "Can you believe this?" "Sit down and be quiet, Evelyn," Mason said. He slid a thick document across the polished table. It stopped perfectly in front of me. "The waiver," he said, "and the transfer of the safety deposit key. Sign the waiver first, then you give me the key, then I give you the check for $50,000. I looked at the paper. It was final. It was absolute. "And the account?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The trust account. You promise we will split it." "I am a man of my word." Mason lied, looking straight into my eyes and straight into the hidden camera Reyes had planted in the smoke detector above his head. 50-50, just as soon as I verify the funds." "Okay," I said. I picked up the pen. My hand shook, not because I was acting, but because the adrenaline was coursing through my veins like ice water. "Wait," Lila chirped. "Hold the pen up. Make it look official. I need a thumbnail for the video. I held the pen. Perfect, Lila said. Okay, go ahead. I lowered the pen to the paper. Mason, Evelyn piped up again. Is that a new watch? It is very shiny. Did Robert buy that for you? No, Mason snapped, his patience fraying. I bought it myself, with my bonus. What bonus? I asked softly, looking up. The company hasn't made a profit in 2 quarters. Mason's eyes narrowed. Executive bonus, Lillian, for restructuring. Something you wouldn't understand. Just sign the damn paper. Restructuring, I repeated. Is that what you call it? Is that what you call the ghost employees? Thomas Wade, Eric Shelby. The room went deadly quiet. Mason froze. The smirk vanished from his face. What did you say? He whispered. And North Star Logistics, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I put the pen down. I wasn't shaking anymore. And J.M. Consulting, $200,000 in 18 months. Mason, that is a hell of a bonus. Lila was still filming, her mouth slightly open, confused but sensing drama, which was good for engagement. You have been looking at files you shouldn't have access to, Mason said, his voice low and dangerous. He stood up, placing his knuckles on the table. I look at everything, I said, like the payments to Medlink courier services. Mason flinched. It was a small movement, a twitch of his left eye, but it was there. I don't know what you are talking about, he said. Sure you do, I said. I stood up too. I wasn't the sick girl in the hospital waiting room anymore. I was the CEO this company deserved. $500 a week for a special delivery, from a contact at the hospital, to keep Dad confused, to keep his heart failing. Shut up, Mason hissed. He looked at Lila. Turn that off. But the viewers, Lila stammered, panning back and forth between us. Turn it off, Mason roared. Lila lowered the phone, but I saw the red light still blinking. She hadn't stopped recording. She was too addicted to the content. You are crazy, Mason said, walking around the table toward me. You are hysterical, just like your mother. My father didn't die of a heart attack, I said, my voice clear and ringing in the room. He was murdered, poisoned, by you and Darlene. You have no proof, Mason shouted, closing the distance. You have nothing. You are a trespasser. I have the pills, Mason, I lied. We didn't have the pills here, but he didn't know that. I found the bottle you hid in the planter, the yellow ones, the ones you told him were vitamins. Mason stopped. His face went pale, then red. You little bitch, he snarled. You broke into my house. My house, I corrected. I should have finished you at the hospital, Mason said. He didn't shout it. He said it with a cold, terrifying calm. I should have pushed you harder. Is that a confession? I asked. Who are you going to tell? Mason sneered. He looked at the notary, who was cowering in his chair. He looked at Lila, who was staring at him in horror. Nobody believes you. You are unstable. I am the owner of this company. He lunged. He grabbed the front of my shirt, bunching the fabric in his fist. He pulled me close, his breath hot on my face. Give me the key, he growled, or I will break your other cheekbone. Evelyn didn't move. She just watched, her eyes tracking his hand on me. Do it, I whispered to Mason. Hit me. Do it for the camera. What Mason stopped. He looked at Lila's phone. Then he looked up. He saw the smoke detector. He saw the tiny red LED that shouldn't have been there. His eyes widened. He realized, finally, that he wasn't the hunter. Get your hands off her. The double doors burst open with a crash that shook the walls. Police! Nobody move! Detective Reyes stormed in, her weapon drawn, followed by 4 uniformed officers in tactical vests. Mason released me and stumbled back, raising his hands. He looked like a man waking up from a dream to find himself in a nightmare. It wasn't me, he screamed immediately. pointing a shaking finger at the door. It was Darlene. It was her idea. I just bought the stuff. I stood there, smoothing my shirt over the hidden microphone. I looked at Mason, sweating and betraying his own mother in under 5 seconds. You better start signing, Mason, I said quietly. But I think you're going to need a different kind of lawyer. To understand why the takedown in that conference room felt so precise, you have to understand the 12 hours that preceded it. The police entering the building was the thunder, but the lightning had struck the night before, while we were sitting in Detective Reyes's unmarked car, assembling the pieces of a trap that had no strings, only gravity. We were parked outside a 24-hour diner, the smell of grease and rain heavy in the air. Reyes had her laptop open on the dashboard, the screen casting a blue glow over her focused face. She had been digging into the phone records of Darlene's burner phone, the one we had identified from the call logs. We got him, Reyes said, breaking the silence. She didn't sound triumphant. She sounded disgusted. The contact at the hospital. It is not a doctor. It is a shifting manager in the pharmacy supply chain, a guy named Kenneth Vance. Vance? I asked, the name triggering a memory from the file in the basement safe. Darlene's third husband was named Patrick Vance. Kenneth is his nephew, Reyes nodded. He works in the narcotics cage. He has been flagging batches of expired cardiac medication for disposal but diverting them. And here's the kicker: he texted Darlene 3 days before your father died. 2 words. Package delivered. They ordered his death like it was a pizza, I whispered, feeling the blood drain from my face. And we have the mechanism for the theft, Calvin Merritt added from the back seat. He had his phone pressed to his ear, listening to a clerk from the state licensing board. He hung up and looked at us. The notary on the will Mason filed Silas Vance, another cousin. He lost his license 5 years ago for notarizing deeds for dead people. The will is not just a forgery. Lillian, it is a conspiracy. We have the whole family tree involved in this fraud. But the darkest revelation came from Evelyn. She was sitting next to me, scrolling through the financial projected sales report for Crestwell Civil and Stone, the sale Mason was rushing to close. He is not selling to a competitor, Evelyn said, her voice tight. I traced the EIN of the buying entity, Apex Holdings, LLC. It was incorporated in Delaware 48 hours after your father's funeral. Who owns it? I asked. It is a blind trust, Evelyn explained. But look at the bank financing. The down payment is coming from an offshore account in the Caymans, the same account where Mason has been sending the ghost payroll. He is buying the company with stolen company money, I asked, trying to wrap my head around the logic. No, Evelyn corrected. He is selling the company to himself. He takes the assets, moves them to Apex, bankrupts Crestwell to wash the liabilities, including the pension fund, and then walks away with clean assets worth $20 million. If he signs that sale document tomorrow, the money vanishes through 5 different jurisdictions before we can even file a motion. That is why he is rushing, I realized. He doesn't care about the $50,000 he offered me. He cares about the $20 million he's about to launder, which is why tomorrow morning is not a negotiation, Reyes said, closing her laptop. It is an interception. She reached into her glove compartment and pulled out a small, flat case. She opened it to reveal a wire, a tiny, high-fidelity microphone taped to a battery pack the size of a matchbox. You need to wear this, Reyes said. We will have audio in the room, but this is the redundancy. I need you to get him to verbalize the intent. I need him to admit he controls the fake will or the medication. I can do it, I said. Don't try to be a hero. Lillian, Reyes warned, her eyes serious. I have seen guys like Mason before. When they feel cornered, they don't surrender. They lash out. He is bigger than you, and he is desperate. Your job is to be the bait, not the executioner. Let him talk. He will talk because he thinks you are about to disappear from his life. We spent the next 2 hours rehearsing the questions. I had to be subtle. I couldn't just ask. Did you poison him? I had to lead him there. Dad seemed so confused on the new meds. The notary didn't ask for ID. By the time I got back to Evelyn's house to try and sleep, my nerves were frayed. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing my lines, 50-50 split, the safety deposit box, the trust fund. Then, at 2 a.m, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I rolled over, expecting a text from Reyes, or maybe a final threat from Mason. It was a number I didn't recognize, no caller ID. I opened the message. It was 2 words, written in all caps, "Don't come." I stared at the screen. The message hung there, glowing in the darkness. Who sent this? Was it Darlene? Did she have a sudden attack of conscience? Unlikely. Darlene Kincaid didn't have a conscience. She had a calculator where her heart should be. Was it Lila Mason's girlfriend had been posting non-stop on social media about the big signing day, showing off her outfit and the boss life? Maybe she had overheard something real. Maybe she realized this wasn't just a business deal. Or was it the hospital contact Kenny Vance getting cold feet? I took a screenshot and sent it immediately to Reyes. Received this just now. Unknown number. Reyes replied instantly, tracing it. Do not reply. It could be a test to see if you are awake and rattling. Stick to the plan. I put the phone down, but sleep was gone. That text message changed the texture of the fear. It meant there was a crack in their armor. Someone on the inside knew that what was happening tomorrow wasn't a business transaction, it was a slaughter, and they wanted me to stay away, but I wasn't staying away. The next morning, as I taped the microphone to my chest, flinching as the cold adhesive hit my skin, I thought about that text, "Don't come." I put on a high-collared blouse to hide the wire. I put on a blazer to hide the trembling. I checked Instagram one last time. Lila had posted again, a video of Mason straightening his tie in the mirror, laughing. The caption read, "Securing the bag, legacy." He looked so confident. He looked like a man who owned the world. He had no idea that the bag he was securing was an evidence bag. "Ready?" Evelyn asked from the doorway. She was dressed in her confused old lady costume, clutching her purse. "Ready," I said. I walked out the door. The text message, "Don't come," echoing in my mind. It was the best advice I had ever received. A smart person wouldn't go. A safe person wouldn't go. But I wasn't trying to be safe. I was trying to be the daughter my father believed I was. I stepped into the car, and we drove toward the trap that we had built with paper, wires, and the arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable. The heavy oak door of my father's office swung open, and for a moment, the sight before me made me want to turn around and vomit. It was not just that they had taken over the space. It was how comfortably they were desecrating it. My father, Robert Parker, had treated this room like a sanctuary. It was a place of blueprints, hard hats, and serious conversations about structural integrity. He kept a jar of peppermint candies on the desk for the foreman and a framed photo of my mother on the credenza. Now. Mason Kincaid was sitting in my father's high-backed leather chair, swiveling back and forth like a child playing king. He had his feet shod in Italian loafers that cost more than a site manager's weekly salary resting on the mahogany desk, right on top of a stack of invoices. Darlene was there, too. She was standing by the wet bar in the corner, a bottle of Dom Perignon in her hand. The cork popped with a sharp report just as I stepped across the threshold. Froth spilled over her manicured fingers, and she laughed a light, tinkling sound that belonged at a wedding, not at the dismantling of a family legacy. "Just in time for the toast," Darlene cooed, pouring the golden liquid into 3 crystal flutes. She held one out toward me. "To closure, Lillian, and to new chapters." I ignored the glass. I kept my hands clamped to my sides, feeling the cold plastic of the battery pack taped against my ribs, beside me. Evelyn shuffled in, clutching her oversized purse to her chest, looking around with wide, feigned confusion. "Oh my," Evelyn murmured, her voice pitching up into a perfect quaver. "Is this where Robert worked? It smells like arrogance." Mason stopped swiveling. He slammed his feet onto the floor and leaned forward, placing his elbows on the desk. The sunlight from the window behind him turned him into a silhouette, but I could feel his eyes drilling into me. "Cut the commentary. Evelyn," Mason barked. He looked at me. "You brought the key." "I have it," I said softly. My voice was steady, but I let my shoulders slump, projecting defeat. "It is in my bag." "Good." Mason slid a document across the desk. It was the same waiver from before, but now there was a pen resting on top of it. My father's fountain pen, the one he used to sign checks for the charity drives. Seeing Mason's fingerprints on it made my blood boil hot and fast. "Sign this, then we open the box. Then you get your check." To my left, I saw movement. Lila Quinn had wedged herself into the corner near the bookshelf. She had her phone out again. Despite Mason yelling at her earlier, she couldn't resist. The red recording light was blinking. She gave me a little wave and mouthed, "Action." Perfect. We had the police wire, and we had the social media backup. I walked to the desk. I pulled out the chair, the client chair, the one where people sat when they needed my father's help, and sat down. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy and cold. "Mason," I said, keeping my voice low so he would have to lean in to hear me. "Before I sign, I need to know one thing, for my peace of mind." "What?" he snapped, checking his watch. "Make it quick. I have a closing meeting at noon." "The men," I said. "The crew chiefs, the pension fund. Dad spent 40 years building that fund. If you sell the company, what happens to them? The waiver says I give up all claims, but does the new buyer guarantee their retirement?" Mason scoffed. It was a dismissive, ugly sound. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. Lillian, he sighed, shaking his head like he was disappointed in my stupidity. "You still think like a charity worker. This is business. The pension is a liability. It is dead weight on the balance sheet." "So you are cutting it?" I asked. "You are wiping it out?" "It is not my problem anymore," Mason said clearly. "Once the sale to Apex goes through, the assets are stripped. The shell company absorbs the debt, declares bankruptcy, and the pension dissolves. That is how the game is played. Bashing rocks doesn't make money. Moving money makes money." I felt the microphone tape itch against my skin. He had just admitted to premeditated fraud and intent to defraud the union. That was 5 to 10 years in federal prison right there. "But those families," I pressed, widening my eyes. "They will lose everything." "Then they should have saved better," Mason sneered. "Sign the paper. Stop stalling." I looked down at the document. I needed more. I needed the violence. I needed the admission of what happened in that house during those long, dark nights. "I can't believe Dad would want this," I whispered. "He fought so hard to stay alive, to protect them." "He was a sick old man," Darlene chimed in, walking over to place a glass of champagne on the desk near my elbow. "He was confused. Honey, toward the end, he didn't know up from down. It was a mercy, really." "Was it?" I turned to look at her. He seemed clear to me, until the last few weeks, when the medicine changed. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mason stopped rocking. Darlene froze with her hand halfway to her pearl necklace. "We gave him the best care," Mason said, his voice dropping into a warning growl. "We hired specialists." "I know," I said. "MedLink Courier Services, $500 a week. That is a lot of money for specialists that don't appear on the insurance forms." Mason's face flushed a deep, mottled red. He stood up slowly. "You are talking nonsense again," he said. "Am I?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I saw the delivery logs. Mason, I know about the pills, the yellow ones, the ones that made his heart flutter." "He needed those," Mason shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. The sound made Lila jump in the corner, but she kept filming. "He was weak. His heart was failing anyway." "So you helped it fail faster?" I asked. "Is that it?" "You just gave him a little push." "I did what I had to do," Mason roared. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me, fueled by ego and rage. He was going to ruin everything. He was going to cut me out. He was already dying. "Lillian, we just smoothed out the timeline. It was a business decision." Smoothed out the timeline. There it was. Confession. Cold-blooded and recorded in high definition. "Mason," Darlene hissed sharply. She stepped forward, her eyes darting to Lila's phone and then back to me. She realized, too late, that the conversation had drifted into lethal territory. "Be quiet." She looked down at me, and for the first time, the mask of the benevolent stepmother slipped completely. Her face was hard, angular, and terrifying. "You know, Lillian," she said softly, leaning down so her face was inches from mine, "stress is a terrible thing. It causes accidents. It causes heart attacks. It causes women to lose things, like their homes. Or their safety. You should be very careful about what accusations you make in this room." It was a threat, a promise that if I walked out of here without signing, I might have a heart attack, just like her 3 previous husbands. I looked at her. I looked at Mason, who was breathing hard, his chest heaving with the adrenaline of his confession. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt lighter than air. "You are right, Darlene," I said. "I should be careful. That is why I brought my own paperwork." I reached into my bag. Mason's eyes lit up. He thought I was reaching for the safety deposit key, the key to the phantom $300,000 I had invented. Instead, I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a color copy of the document we had found in the safe. I slapped it onto the desk, right on top of his fraudulent waiver. The red wax seal of the notary shone brightly in the sunlight. The signature, Robert J. Parker, with the open P and the long trailing T cross, was unmistakable. "What is this?" Mason asked, frowning. "Read it," I said. He picked it up. His eyes scanned the header. Last will and testament. He scanned the date. May 10th, 2 days before the death. He read the beneficiary line. Lillian Parker. He read the exclusion clause. Mason Kincaid and Darlene Kincaid are to receive 0 assets. The paper began to shake in his hands. It wasn't a tremble. It was a violent vibration. His face turned a color I had never seen on a human being, a gray, ashy purple. "This," he choked out, "this is fake." "It is real," I said, standing up. "It was in the safe, Mason, behind the fuse box, the one you were too lazy to find. And the original is already with the probate judge." Mason looked up. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The company, the money, the sale, the $20 million, it was all gone. He wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a rich man. He was nothing. And then, he snapped. It happened faster than it had at the hospital. There was no buildup. He just exploded. "You bitch," he screamed. He crumpled the paper and hurled it at me. Then he lunged across the desk. He was fast, but I was ready. I had played this moment in my head 1,000 times since the hospital. I knew he would come for me. As he vaulted over the mahogany surface, scattering papers and knocking over the champagne bottle, I stepped to the left. It was a simple movement, a sidestep. Mason, carried by his own momentum and blinded by rage, couldn't stop. He missed me. His shoulder slammed into the heavy metal filing cabinet behind where I had been sitting. Crash! The sound of metal buckling was deafening. Mason grunted in pain, rebounding off the cabinet, flailing to keep his balance. "Oh my God!" Lila screamed. She dropped her phone. It hit the carpet face up. The camera lens was now staring at the ceiling, but the microphone was still capturing every ragged breath. Mason spun around, his eyes wild. He was hurt, holding his shoulder, but he was still coming. He reached into his jacket pocket. I didn't know if he had a gun. I didn't know if he had a knife. "Mason, stop!" Darlene shrieked, backing away toward the door. Mason ignored her. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "I will kill you," he roared. "I will kill you myself." He took a step toward me. I didn't back down. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him and said, "Too late." Bam! The double doors of the conference room didn't just open. They were kicked in. Police get on the ground. Detective Reyes was the first one through the door, her service weapon drawn and leveled directly at Mason's chest. Behind her, a swarm of uniformed officers flooded the room. their tactical vests creating a wall of blue and black. "Drop it. Hands in the air." Mason froze. He looked at the gun pointed at his heart. He looked at me. For a split second, I saw him calculate his odds. He looked at the window. "Don't even think about it," Reyes shouted. "Down now." The fight went out of him. His knees buckled. He sank to the floor, sobbing. It was a pathetic, ugly sound. "It wasn't me," he blubbered as two officers grabbed his arms and wrenched them behind his back. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. "It was Darlene. She told me to do it. She bought the pills." "Shut up, you idiot," Darlene hissed. She was standing by the wet bar, trying to look dignified as an officer cuffed her hands. "I demand a lawyer. This is entrapment." "You have the right to remain silent," Reyes recited. Walking over to Mason, she looked down at him with utter contempt. "I suggest you start using it." Lila was sitting in the corner, hyperventilating. An officer was gently helping her up. "I got it all on video," she stammered. "Is that good?" "It is very good," the officer said dryly. "We will need that phone as evidence." The room was a chaos of radio chatter and shouting, but I felt strangely still. I walked over to the desk. I picked up the crumpled copy of the real will. I smoothed it out on the mahogany surface. Evelyn walked up beside me. She wasn't acting anymore. She looked fierce. "Nice sidestep," she said. "Thanks," I said. "I practiced." Detective Reyes walked over to us. She holstered her weapon, but her face wasn't celebrating yet. She looked tense. "We got them," I said, gesturing to Mason and Darlene being hauled out the door. "It is over." Reyes shook her head slightly. She leaned in close so only I could hear. "We got the buyer," she whispered, "and we got the broker, but we still have a loose end." "Kenny Vance?" I asked. "The hospital contact." "My team just raided the pharmacy supply cage," Reyes said grimly. "He wasn't there. He clocked out an hour ago. He knows something went wrong. He is in the wind." "Lillian." I looked at the empty doorway where Mason had just been dragged out. "He won't get far," I said. "No," Reyes agreed. "But until he is in cuffs, you are still a witness in danger. We are taking you to a safe house." I looked at my father's office one last time. I looked at the peppermint jar. I looked at the photo of my mother. The usurpers were gone. The space was mine again. "I don't need a safe house," I said, picking up the fountain pen Mason had tried to make me use. "I have a company to run, and if Mr. Vance shows up, let him come. I am done hiding." Reyes looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said, "but I am leaving a patrol car outside." "That works," I said. I pocketed the pen. The war was won, but the cleanup was just beginning. The trial of the state versus Mason Kincaid and Darlene Kincaid did not begin with a shout. It began with the shuffling of paper, mountains of it. The courtroom was packed. The story of the Crestwell conspiracy, as the local papers had dubbed it, had drawn a crowd. Former employees, neighbors like Mrs. Rowe, and even the young mother who had witnessed the slap in the hospital waiting room were all sitting in the gallery, but I did not look at them. I sat at the prosecution table next to Calvin Merritt, my eyes fixed forward, staring at the empty jury box that would soon decide the fate of the people who destroyed my family. The defense strategy was predictable. Their high-priced lawyers tried to separate the financial crimes from the death of my father. They argued that Mason was simply an overambitious but incompetent businessman who made accounting errors, and that Darlene was a grieving widow who had no knowledge of the company's inner workings. They wanted a slap on the wrist for fraud. They wanted to avoid the murder charge, but they had underestimated the sheer volume of the truth we had dug out of the basement. Calvin Merritt stood up first. He was 80 years old, moving a bit slower than he used to, but his voice was a lion's roar in the quiet room. He didn't start with numbers. He started with the man. "Robert Parker built bridges," Calvin told the jury. "He built foundations that could withstand earthquakes, but he knew that the cracks in a foundation are often invisible until the house collapses. And 3 weeks before he died, Robert Parker realized his own house was crumbling from the inside. Calvin walked to the evidence table and picked up the document that Mason had tried to destroy in the office, the real last will and testament. This document, Calvin said, holding it aloft, was not just a distribution of assets. It was a cry for help. It was notarized, sealed, and hidden in a safe behind a fuse box because Robert Parker knew he was being held hostage in his own home. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, asked Calvin to read the handwritten letter attached to the will. Calvin cleared his throat. The room went silent. "My dearest Lillian," Calvin read, his voice catching slightly on my father's words. "If you are reading this, I have run out of time. Mason is stealing from the company. But it is worse than that. I think Darlene is helping him. I feel foggy every time I eat. When I skip a meal, I can think again. I am scared. Lilypad. Protect the men." I heard a sniffle from the gallery. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my composure. Then it was Evelyn's turn. Evelyn Price took the stand wearing a sharp gray suit. Looking nothing like the confused old woman she had played in the office, she was a weaponized accountant. She set up a projector and walked the jury through the money trail. "Here," Evelyn pointed to a complex diagram. "This is the Crestwell Pension Fund, $4 million. And here is where it went." She traced the lines. "Ghost employees," she explained, her voice crisp. "Thomas Wade, Eric Shelby, names that do not exist. Their salaries were deposited into an account owned by North Star Logistics. And North Star Logistics is a shell company registered in Nevada to one owner." She clicked the remote. A document appeared on the screen. "Mason Kincaid." The jury looked at Mason. He was sitting at the defense table, chewing on his fingernail, looking pale and sweaty. "But the greed did not stop at theft," Evelyn continued. "He was preparing to sell the entire company to himself using a blind trust called Apex Holdings. If he had succeeded, the pension fund would have been wiped out. 200 families would have been left with nothing." The financial crimes were a slam dunk. We could see it in the jurors' eyes. They were disgusted. But we needed them to be angry. We needed them to understand that the theft was the motive for murder. That was when Detective Reyes played the videos. First, the security footage from the hospital waiting room. The screen showed me, looking small and frail, standing in front of Mason. It showed him shoving papers in my face. It showed him looming over me. Then, it showed the slap. The sound of the impact seemed to echo in the courtroom. I saw a juror, a middle-aged woman, flinch. On the screen, I fell. Mason stepped over me. He didn't look back. It was a portrait of pure, unadulterated malice. "This is the defendant," the prosecutor said. "When he thinks no one is watching." Then, they played the second video, the one Lila Quinn had accidentally recorded on the floor of the conference room. The angle was skewed, staring up at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, but the audio was crystal clear. "He was going to ruin everything," Mason's voice screamed from the speakers, filled with rage. "He was going to cut me out. He was already dying. Lillian." We just smoothed out the timeline. It was a business decision. Smoothed out the timeline. The phrase hung in the air like toxic smoke. Mason's lawyer tried to object, claiming the recording was obtained illegally, but the judge overruled him. Lila was a private citizen recording in a public space, and Mason had no expectation of privacy when screaming at the top of his lungs. It was damning. But the defense still had one card to play. They argued that Mason's words were hyperbole, that smoothing the timeline meant managing the business transition, not killing his stepfather. They argued there was no physical proof of poisoning. The pills I had stolen from the planter were indeed tampered with, containing digoxin, but the defense claimed there was no proof Mason knew what was in them. They tried to paint him as a victim of a bad pharmacist. That was when the prosecution called their surprise witness. The back doors opened, and 2 marshals escorted a man in an orange jumpsuit to the stand. He was balding, nervous, and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. It was Kenneth Vance, the hospital contact. He had been arrested 3 days after the raid. He hadn't been caught at the border or on a private jet. He was caught at a gas station 10 miles out of town, trying to buy prepaid credit cards with a debit card linked to the very shell account Mason had used to pay him. It was a sloppy mistake born of panic. Kenny Vance did not want to go to prison for life. He had cut a deal. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor said. "Kenneth Vance," he mumbled. "And your relationship to the defendant, Darlene Kincaid." "She is my aunt," Kenny said. "My father's sister," Darlene, who had been sitting stone-faced throughout the trial, finally reacted. Her eyes widened, and she hissed something under her breath that her lawyer quickly silenced. "Mr. Vance?" the prosecutor asked. "Did you provide prescription medication to your aunt and her son?" "Yes," Kenny admitted. "What kind of medication?" "Digoxin," Kenny said, "and beta blockers, and diuretics." "Did Robert Parker have a prescription for these specific dosages?" "No," Kenny said, looking down at his hands. "Robert Parker was prescribed a low dose for maintenance. They asked for higher concentrations. They wanted the pills crushed and re-encapsulated into yellow shells so they looked like his vitamins." "Did they tell you why?" Kenny hesitated. He looked at Mason, then at Darlene. He took a deep breath. "Darlene told me that Robert was suffering," Kenny said. "She said he was in pain and that they wanted to help him sleep. She said to make it look natural. She said, if his heart stops, nobody questions a man with a bad ticker." "And the payments?" "Mason wired the money," Kenny said. $500 a week, plus a bonus when the package was delivered. The package being Robert Parker's death. "Yes." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel, demanding order, but the noise was uncontrollable. The incompetent businessman defense had just evaporated. This was a conspiracy, a family business of murder. But Detective Reyes had one final nail for the coffin. She took the stand to introduce the character evidence against Darlene Kincaid. "During our investigation," Reyes said, projecting a new set of documents onto the screen, "we looked into Mrs. Kincaid's past, specifically, her previous marriages. 3 photos appeared, 3 men. Gerald Miller, Anthony Russo, Patrick Vance." Reyes listed them. "All 3 were married to Darlene Kincaid. All 3 were wealthy. All 3 died of sudden cardiac events within 2 years of the marriage." The jury stared at the photos. The pattern was undeniable. "And in Mrs. Kincaid's personal safe, recovered from the house," Reyes continued, "we found this." She held up an evidence bag containing a small, leather-bound notebook. "It is a ledger," Reyes said. "It lists the insurance payouts for each husband, and next to Robert Parker's name, there was a figure written in red ink, $20 million, pending sale." Darlene Kincaid wasn't a grieving widow. She was a serial killer who used marriage certificates as hunting licenses. When it was time for closing arguments, Mason tried to save himself. He stood up, ignoring his lawyer, and shouted, "It was her. She made me do it. I just wanted the money. I didn't want to kill him." His outburst only sealed his fate. He had admitted to the greed, and his text messages, "Hurry up," before the audit proved he was an active participant in the timeline of the murder. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a mechanic with grease still under his fingernails, stood up to read the verdict. "On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Mason Kincaid, guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Darlene Kincaid, guilty. On the charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, we find both defendants guilty." The judge did not show mercy. She sentenced Darlene Kincaid to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She called her a predator who hid in plain sight. She sentenced Mason Kincaid to life in prison, plus 30 years for the financial crimes. She looked at him over her glasses and said, "You sold your soul for a lifestyle you did not earn. Now you have a lifetime to think about the cost." As the bailiffs hauled them away, Mason weeping and begging, Darlene staring straight ahead with cold, dead eyes. I didn't feel the surge of joy I expected. I felt a profound, quiet relief. The monster under the bed was gone. The heavy weight on my chest was lifted. The court also issued a restitution order. All assets from the Kincaid accounts were seized. The hidden accounts in the Caymans were frozen and repatriated. The judge appointed a special master to oversee the restoration of the Crestwell Pension Fund. Every single worker would get their retirement back, every single dime. 2 weeks later, I walked into the offices of Crestwell Civil and Stone. It was quiet. The police tape was gone. The forensic team had returned the files. I walked past the receptionist desk. Mrs. Higgins, whom I had rehired immediately, gave me a warm smile. "Good morning, Ms. Parker," she said. "Good morning, Mrs. Higgins," I replied. I walked into my father's office. The peppermint jar was back on the desk. The photo of my mother was back on the credenza. The chair, his leather chair, was empty. I walked over to the window and looked out at the construction yard below. I could see the trucks moving. I could see the men working, pouring concrete for a new foundation. They were safe. Their futures were secure. I thought about the hospital waiting room. I thought about the taste of blood in my mouth and the stinging heat of Mason's hand on my face. I raised a hand to my cheek. The bruise was gone now, faded into memory. Mason had slapped me because he wanted a fight. He wanted a brawl in the dirt, but I hadn't fought him with fists. I hadn't screamed back. I had fought him with ink. I had fought him with patience. I had fought him with the one thing he couldn't buy, couldn't steal, and couldn't forge: the truth. I turned away from the window and sat down in my father's chair. It felt big. It felt heavy. But as I spun it around to face the desk, picking up a pen to sign the first honest payroll check this company had seen in months, it felt right. "Okay, Dad," I whispered to the quiet room. "Let's get back to work." Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and resilience. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below with your city or country, so we can see how far Lillian's story has traveled. If you enjoyed seeing the bad guys get exactly what they deserved, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need a little victory today.